Hello again, Conte. People seem to want a tutorial on how I time my headlocks and stuff. So, I mean, I'm just going to let it play in the background and then we'll actually slow down the footage and talk about the specific openings in detail. But just before that, I'll give a couple of like disclaimers and stuff. My timings aren't perfect. There are runners out there who will like guaranteed get the strong charge level 3. I don't really get that usually because I kind of prioritize like getting a consistent luck at my skill level. That kind of is like hard for me to break. So I'll do strats that are like slightly less optimal. I'll like overcharge a little bit or undercharge my my strong charge just to try and guarantee that I'm gonna not get pushed around by the head or stuff like that. And I'll show you what can go wrong as the footage plays. And sort of I'll show you what I'm trying to avoid by doing these various strats. But yeah, there are definitely ways to improve the timings here. But this is just the way that I've been doing it to get a fairly consistent headlock that tends to beat Kushala. Like if you mess it up once or twice, then it'll tend to beat Kushala in around under 5 minutes. And if you get it perfect, it's under 4 minutes even. Yeah, so that's just a little bit of a disclaimer. Some of the timings here won't seem perfect, and that's because they're not. So while this plays, let's talk about something a bit more basic, the actual idea behind these stagger thresholds and these headlock runs. Because I know a lot of people who haven't done this kind of thing before do watch my videos, so I'm sorry if this is a little bit basic. We'll get to the actual timings in a second. But essentially, imagine Kushala's head has 1000 damage before Kushala topples. That's not the actual number, but just for the sake of the example. 1000 health. So what happens is if you do, let's say, 900 health while Kushala's on the ground and it gets up, you'll only have to do another 100 and then it'll go straight back down again. However, if it's on the ground and you do 1100 damage, then that first 1000 will reach the threshold and then that extra damage will tick over. And so then he'll go to another 1000 and you'll do 100 damage to it, so it'll be at 900. Essentially, when you overshoot the threshold, you're kind of like looping back around. And so when Kushala gets up, you'll have to do 900 damage. Basically like a full topple's worth. And you'll have to deal with all of the Kushala wind and all that nonsense. So the idea for this run is to hit Kushala on its head just as it's getting up. If you do your TCS too early while it's still on the ground, you'll overshoot the threshold. So you need to aim it by the time that, like for example there, you just saw on screen, Kushala didn't go back down even though I timed the TCS there, and that's because of a bit of an issue with Kushala. Not only do you have to do it after it's gotten up, but you actually need to wait a few moments because it still kind of counts as being toppled until it like has the freedom to change its animation. And so you actually have to wait a few more moments before you hit it with the TCS. And so that's what makes timing this a little bit weird. It's just about being late enough to, like for example there, you see I tend to err on the side of lateness there. Kushala had already started its next move. Now, the thing is, generally Kushala will be quite lenient with its AI. Most of the moves that it can do after it gets up, it likes to taunt, it likes to roar, it likes to sit there for a little bit of time. Most of the AI patterns that it can do will be conducive to another headlock, but there are moves it can do that can like break the chain. It can do a move and that'll take it out, and that's like completely fine. The thing is, and you saw how much I overcharged my TCS there, by the way, which wasn't necessarily ideal, but it worked. Yeah, so the idea is to knock Kushala just as it gets back up. Wait a few moments and then get it so that it knocks back down again. And if you continue the chain, it doesn't take too long for Kushala to get taken out completely. It has something in the region of like 30,000 health. And so if each of these is doing, I don't know, like 1500 damage in total, it only really takes 20 in a row. And even if you aren't perfect with it, it's not a huge deal. Don't worry about it too much. Even if you can only get it off once or twice per lock, you're basically going from doing 1500 per knockdown to like 4500 or 6000, you know? And so rather than doing like 5% of his health per knockdown, you're doing like more in the region of 15 or 20, even if you can't get it perfect. We'll talk about this set in a bit more detail. I'll just let it play on screen for now, just so that anybody who only wants to see the set can see it. But basically, I'm trying to reach 100 affinity. There are some considerations about Agitator that we need to make. And obviously, you can run more health boosts and stuff. Because this is a headlock, I prioritize DPS to make it faster. But you don't need anywhere near this many points of attack to... or like this many DPS skills to reach the actual topple. Like you'll be able to do the headlock without most of this stuff. But yeah, okay. So let's talk about slow mode footage and let's actually talk about the openings and stuff. So let's count the head bops. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It always does 5 while it's down, unless you dunk it from the air. In which case it will do, if you flinch shot it, KO it, whatever, it does 5. But if you dunk it, it'll do less. So wait for it to land naturally. So 1, 2. Now watch this. On the apex of the third one, right as his head is sort of roughly at the peak of its backswing, that's when I tend to go. Even if my SCS isn't fully charged. And the reason I do that is because it lets you pull back your TCS before his head pushes you out of the way. An issue that I encountered frequently was his headbutt pushing me out of the way. And also look, as his head swivels to get up, that's when I release my TCS. And so then we can land it immediately again. So let's just watch that again in fast motion for this one. So a single bop, the second bop, then as his head is sort of halfway up, I let go. And then I pull back before the head has a chance to like completely push me out of the way. And then I wait for his head to start swiveling as he gets up. And I pop him again. Now you might have noticed that I turn a little bit, and we'll talk about that here as well. It's a little bit harder to see from this angle, so we'll just let it play out. You can see, look at his head on the ground compared to where it is when he gets up. It actually moves to the left a little bit. If we go back to the slow motion footage, this is the SCS upon the third bop. And look at where his head is when it's at its like low point, when he's sort of in rest. It's right over there, sort of by that little wooden thing that the gate switch would normally be on. That's the fourth bop here. Now watch when he gets up where the sort of tip of his head finally ends up. You'll see he sort of pulls it all the way back to where his apex was, back in the backswing. Look at that, it's moved all the way to the left. And the way that tends to work is it goes towards his, we'll just watch it one more time. It goes towards his wing. So you can imagine the direction of his neck and his wing, that's the direction we're turning in. And so we move to face that direction. I'll show it again. This time he's going to move to the right because his neck is like that way and his wings are that way. So watch, you can see in my position here, I'm sort of making sure I'm hitting the head. But then before I TCS, I turn a tiny bit, just a tiny bit, just so that I can move to the right and make sure I get the head as it comes up from being on the ground. So while the positioning, while the timing is important, that positioning is just as important. And do be careful about being too close to the head because you'll see you can get pushed out of the way with the AI, with the head bop rather. But yeah, you can see that how I'm turning to the left to just sort of guarantee it. I don't know if that's strictly necessary. You can maybe hit the head on straight on with your first few attacks and it'll like require less of that, but this is just how I found to do it consistently. Again, we've turned to the right a little bit because that's where its head's going to end up. You see? So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if it does. I've hopefully played enough footage here. Now let's talk about some other considerations that we need to make. So as an example, this is what happens if you don't time it properly, if you don't go for the apex of the third swing, if you wait. So look, that's one bop, two bops. Now you can see I let it finish the third bop because I'm desperate to get my SCS loaded up. And look at that. The head bop immediately pushes me to the side. That doesn't always happen depending on your positioning. However, it does happen to me quite frequently because I'm not good at positioning. So yeah, like you can work at it so that you can get guaranteed SCSs. However, in my experience, it's much better to not go for that and to go for the apex of the third swing, even if you're not fully charged. The nice thing is, however, because we missed completely, because we didn't overshoot the threshold, it took literally just 2 openings before we had Kushala back down on the ground again. So generally speaking, on the side of whiffing. It's much better to whiff your attack and to then get punished for that by like not having Kushala get knocked down, but then being at a low health, than it is to hit your attack, but then have Kushala overshoot and you have to do the entire threshold again. Unfortunately, we didn't crit there, and that's the consideration I'll talk about in a second when talking about like skill choice and stuff. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but basically we didn't crit because we don't have Agitator active, and so it wasn't enough to get it down. But you see that 2 level 1 unsheathes were all it took to then get him back down again, because we didn't overshoot the threshold, because we whiffed completely. It means that we were actually fairly easy for us to just get it back down again, and then we can try and continue the lock. Of course, unfortunately, I got another missed crit, so what can you do? But yeah. So let's talk about the set in a bit more detail. It's honestly quite simple. I'm running 3 points of weakness exploit for the 30 affinity on weak spots, and I'm running max critical eye. We are running 3-piece Kaiser and 2-piece Brekkie for Agitator Secret and for Master's Touch. Master's Touch is quite important in my opinion, just because it means that you don't accidentally drop down to white sharpness during the headlock, which would obviously be a pretty significant loss of DPS, and you can't really exactly afford to sharpen while you're doing a headlock. That's the other reason I don't run 50 points with weakness exploit, 50 affinity with weakness exploit, I run for 30. It's because tenderizing just makes headlocks a little bit more difficult. It is more optimal to do it that way. You get more damage, especially on Kushala's head, and you can run more DPS skills rather than affinity. However, for me, having to force myself to tenderize basically just made the stunlocks even more annoying to pull off consistently. Tenderize, I'd take a little bit too long, tenderize would run out, it just wasn't fun. So yeah, I'm running a build that gets me 100 affinity, without tenderize, without having to soften the monster's parts, and aside from that, I'm basically just running DPS, attack boost, agitator. 3 points of focus are quite nice, and the 1 point of maximum might is just there so that during unenraged mode, I'm slightly higher. I have slightly higher affinity. So right now I have 80 affinity while it's not enraged, and then the agitator secret takes me up to 100. With maximum might active, and it usually is active by the time I'm back within TCS range, I'm at 90 affinity, so it's even better. In hindsight, maybe I would drop a single point of focus for another point of maximum might, and that would basically guarantee my crits with the TCS. Slinging Capacity is nice because it basically just lets you get off another flint shot without having to go and find stones. You saw how quickly we transitioned from well, not whiffing because it was intentional, the one that we missed when we did it too early, but how easy we transitioned to get it back down on the ground with another flint shot because I had the extra stones from before. So that's why I run a single point of Stone Slinger, but you know, you're welcome to run whatever you like. And don't worry if you don't have the decorations to get all of these skills, it's not a huge deal. The thing is, you don't need this much DPS to to get the headlock consistently. You could drop most of these points of attack and you'd be completely fine. Really, the key is just making sure you get your crits. If you run even like 3-piece Kaiser, 2-piece Furious, or Jang for Max Might Secret, that would probably do a better job of being more consistent, and you would need like less DPS skills even further than that. But yeah, I'm using Lightbreak because it's a fairly achievable greatsword, but you might want to use Safi Shatter Splitter instead. You can maybe, I don't know, get TO Essence and run some other. It's really up to you. There's a lot of room to wiggle with the set because you're doing all of your damage in the TCS, you don't need to worry about, like, with Spread HPG, for example, you need to get the perfect number of shots beforehand, like prime up with Stagger. With TCS, it's fine. So long as you get the timing right, it's just guaranteed to go back down again. So long as you crit and have at least a little bit of DPS on the set. So yeah, I would advise you probably run like the Kaiser Master Rank helm rather than the Gamma helm, and just lose a bit of DPS to get the skill back. I would recommend you run 3 points of health boost if you aren't like chaining it consistently. But because this is a fairly consistent stun lock for me now, I don't really have a need for 3 points of health boost. I just have that 1 point there to make it a little bit more bearable. Yeah, so hopefully this made sense. You got to be careful with this set because, as I said, the lack of agitator, when it's unenraged, you will be like missing some crits, and that will have an opportunity to make you mess up the chain. If you want something more consistent, then yeah, run some more points of Max Might or Furious Jang or whatever. But otherwise, I basically think I've covered all of the concerns. So yeah, let me know if this wasn't enough. I hope it was. I tried to show a lot of slowed down footage, and I tried to get footage of all the stuff that can go wrong. But of course, I'm not perfect, and there is a chance that some stuff slipped through the cracks. But I'll try to like answer in comments if anybody has any questions remaining. Yeah, so good luck with this hunt, I suppose. I'll be doing a Spread HPG sunlock guide, which is much simpler than this. Hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, take it easy. Bye-bye.